Da 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 da! What's my good cheer? Welcome, everybody. Let's give YouTube a couple of minutes to get those notifications out there. And in the meantime, if you've never popped into one of my lives before, hi, I'm Cindy. I explore the inside and the outside. And we are on our 51st word, powerful word. We have been picking a powerful word every Monday for a year now, I would have to say, because some of those words we have gone over a couple of times. And I don't know why or how I decided to choose 54 powerful words. I did have a whole list. I probably could have gone on for another 6 months, but it worked out perfectly. I didn't have the timing set in place. We are leaving on our trip in middle of September there, a week after this project that we've been working on for the past year is finished. In that span of the week, I suspect I'm going to be pretty busy, pretty buzzed out, and pretty stressed out. I would think to about the maximum to what I am used to without having that direct interaction with other people, meaning having somebody breathe down my neck and direct me, right? That I'm making and designing, creating, right? Experiencing, adventuring this holiday I've put together myself, right? For myself. Yesterday, we talked a little bit about that love for life, you know, and how some of us, right? That love for life, it's hard to move with. It's hard to understand. It's hard to digest because we look around in our environments and our experiences and we don't find the things to love, right? We don't find the things to love. It's because we're not looking for them. What we think about is realized. I get it, right? I woke up to these ideas quite late in my life, and even so, I managed to keep that amazing, because it is amazing, optimistic kind of attitude throughout all those, right, tragedies in my life. And I'm smiling at it now because, you know, talking, crying, time, it's true, it does heal all wounds. And, I was somebody to lock down when that very core of me was actually shattered. And it's been shattered a few times. And we're talking about love this week. That's our powerful word that we got this week, right? Not super excited to be talking about love because love is very private. But then again, right? A lot of the stuff I talk about is very private. But it's through our experiences that, we get to be those experts. If not for other people, then just for ourselves. We know not what to do next time. Those qualities, those values that we, right, we keep in high esteem, that we want to live by ourselves, right? We get that opportunity sometimes, right, to take a look around and really make some good choices for ourselves when it comes to that partnership, in that interconnection and that relationship that we have with other people. And it's all in our choices, but lots of times we don't choose well, right? In the end, my parents suited each other, fitted each other very well. They took care of each other. They tolerate each other. They knew each other. They could manipulate and influence each other. They respected each other. They, right? In some ways, they thought only in the patterning of the way they created their lives and of course their children's lives, right? Because we were all living in the same household. But my mother was not my father's first choice. My mother and father, they had only known each other maybe 2 weeks. They might have seen each other in passing because my mother worked with my father's mother at the hospital, and my father had bought an engagement ring, not for my mother, and he asked the woman that he loved to marry him, and she refused him. Right? We talk about being trashed, being totally mortified because if you're going to go off and buy an engagement ring, right? You got to be pretty sure that there is going to be some kind of receivership in that. I would assume my dad was a very smart man, and I do believe he ran on his motions 100%. But being the empath that he was, right? I bet you that this she was a nurse. Um, I bet you she loved my father. I bet you my father felt that. And that was probably the sureness that she would accept his offer of marriage when he gave her the ring. But that wasn't the case. He never told me why she said no. Maybe he did because I do have a bit of an idea. I think it was the career, right? My father was a lumberjack, a commercial fisherman. She wanted somebody with some of the same interests as her, you know, maybe a doctor or a male nurse, somebody in the same industry, somebody on the same intellectual scale. But my father was very intellectual, but it wasn't in the schooling, right? My father finished high school, if that, and he didn't move forward in any way. My father was absolutely just devastated, just devastated. His mother didn't know what to do, but right, she thought maybe another woman might help. And my mother had gone through her own traumatic experiences at the same time as when that was going on with my father. My mother had been attacked. She was sexually attacked. And it was very shortly before she got introduced to my father by, right, my father's mother. And being traumatized herself, right? Both of them emotionally trashed. Right, they met. Right, or in those days you got married. You wanted to have sex. You got married, and my dad was convinced he was going to be having some sex very shortly in this proposal that he had to this nurse in this hospital that his mother worked at. Right, they got married, and it was a couple of years, maybe a few years of just one tragedy, one traumatic event after another. I don't have to go through them, but there were lessons in that and in the whole sequencing and in those serendipities that you feel the patterning in all of that and how it all came together, right? My father did not love my mother. My mother did not love my father when they met or when they got married. In fact, my father said the first right? They had a very volatile, their entire marriage was very volatile. But the first couple of years, my father said it was very volatile. He couldn't stand he couldn't stand. It was actually even physically, right? It was bad, but at the same time, right? My grandmother had a heart attack and almost passed away. My uncle committed suicide. All of this happening within a couple of years. Like, I couldn't imagine the state that everybody was in when I was born. My aunt was only a half a dozen years older than I was. I suspect I was her lifesaver at that point, right? When her brother passed away, that she clung to me, right? That she involved her life. And I guess the same thing with my grandmother. My mother herself had postpartum depression, and I was rejected by my mother very, very, very early in my life. But my father more than made up for it, being the person that he was, and it was his dream to have a family. And again, maybe I was a bit of that savior in a difficult period in that family's life, right? Mother did a little bit better by the time my sister was born, right? My mother and my father had become a little bit more comfortable with each other. You are like the people that you surround yourself with. I think that comfortability, right? It's My husband said it, when we separated, there's got to be more than just being comfortable, right? A marriage should be a lot of things in that partnership, in all those ways that a partnership in trueness should be like, right? And they grew into that love, and lots of denominations out in the world do have those arranged marriages, because it was almost like an arranged marriage, wasn't it? You know, because it was just so quick. It was only 2 weeks, and they were married, and those tragedies kept happening. I mean, there were miscarriages and stuff before, right? Even before I showed up into the picture, and it carried on, right? I come from a very dynamic family. Each one of us, talking about my sisters now, we're all very different from each other. We have commonalities because of our parents, right? So that was an issue of self love, right? My father didn't love himself enough that he let that rejection of the woman that he loved push him into a marriage that he probably might have thought differently of, right? If he had had a moment, a calmer state of mind, that he wasn't rushed and pushed and right, and his mother setting him up. But at the same time, my mother was going through traumatic events too, and right, she needed to feel safe. She needed to be contained, right? And yeah, my husband, my father was a very, very handsome man too. My father was a very handsome man, and I'm sure my mother would have thought that he was quite the score. And I suspect that nurse who rejected him didn't reject him because she didn't love him, because, right, my father would have known that much at the very least, right? Knowing the person that my father was, and knowing those sensitivities about him and his intelligence, and how, right, how he analyzed. Like, he wouldn't have made a move of asking somebody to marry him if he wasn't sure of the love that was there. 100%. this week we got this word love. Hello, Melvin. Hello, Debbie. Let me read these comments. And Melvin's really awesome because every time he pops in, he always gives me his good cheer. I absolutely think that's just absolutely amazing. I love it when he does it. Let's see if he did it this time. He did. My good cheer is just waking every morning and hoping for the same tomorrow morning. Isn't that amazing? So you wake up on the good side of the bed, do you, Melvin? That you're able to be grateful and wishful of the next day, just being able to wake up the same way. I think that's amazing. Debbie says, I'm so sorry to hear about your early life, Cindy. My parents didn't always get along, but they always used to tell me and my sisters that I don't know what I'd do without your mom and dad. Both both are gone, right? Yeah, it like I said, it was a dynamic family that I grew up in, and each one of us had our roles within that family. And it's not like I was brought up in that family unloved, right? My grandmother loved me, my father loved me, my aunt loved me, right? There was love in my life. And at the very least, I'm grateful right now that, I was able to recognize that lack of love coming towards me in those dynamic relationships that I did have that did, right, kind of hold me back a little bit. I recognize that it wasn't my fault, that it wasn't me, right? I don't know how I knew that, but I knew that. I've always recognized the difficulties that people had, and at the very least, if I didn't recognize it, I probably would have made excuses for them, right? Not wanting to look at those rejections and dejections and judgments, and maybe even looking at myself and believing what I was experiencing, right? Within my own family. But lots of people do, and that's the hard thing about this world. And that's part of what I want to give back to that world, right? And I wrote it down here. What was it? I never have the notes when I want them. Rescuing the future. In rescuing the future, right? The kids growing up nowadays, they're growing up now the way that I grew up, right? My mother worked full time. I was taking care of my three sisters at a very, very young age. You didn't have to wait to be 12 years old to babysit in the 70s. You didn't have to. And if you did have to, my mother did not follow that rule, right? I was able, well, I think just as much as she did not rub me well, I think equally I did not rub her well too. I'm not saying her as my mother, but those other parts of her, right? Sometimes we can spend our whole lives around people, and in that biting, right? Me and my sister Tracy, we always did that. Every time I walk into the house and she would criticize my bangs or the way I was dressed, or different things about me, and it would just make me feel very, very bad. And because I loved my sister so much, because I was so codependent with her, that relationship, I never even related the fact that she was my mother's daughter just as much as I was my father's daughter. My sister Tracy was my mother's daughter. And when my mother passed away, right? Oh my goodness. Me and my sister started not rubbing each other well, just like, right, what happened between me and my mother. I recognize, right, it's all in the patterning and it's all in those little chinks that go into those routines that we have that get our attention because it's so different from the day to day. It's so different from the usual that we can't help but take note in that, right? So this week we had this word love, and when we think about, saving the future is always the children. It's always the next generation. It's always, right, the next stage of evolution. It always is. This has been going on for millions of years. Right? And you see that nervous laugh when I say this has been going on for millions of years, because this has been going on for millions of years, but because I'm trying to be respectful, because I understand that in certain denominations, cultures, and religions, right, this has not been going on for millions. This is millions of years, right? So I'm trying to be respectful in divvying out the lessons from the point where I'm standing in my own beliefs, right? So you have to be able to siphon through it for your own beliefs, right? Because you might believe that this has only been going on for a few thousand years, right? But I believe this has been going on for millions of years. And I do believe that science and medicine in this digital age, it can't help but, right, have it all, the whole world just shake and all that evidence come to the surface. And you can't argue with the evidence, but it's not when that is surfaced do you say, told you so, right? It's not that. It's just like, okay, now how do we work with this as smoothly as we can? Because obviously it's going to cause a storm, right? It's going to cause a storm, and people will be like sticking their heads in the ground. They'll be, right, dropping. Not, I'm hoping that, because there are so many amazing denominations out in the world, I'm not stepping into them fully, but because of what I do, right? I do stick my toes into some of these subjects, and I do try to be respectful in those conversations with other people by being a little bit schooled in it. You know what I mean? Right? I know who Buddha is. That's helpful, right? I know who Jehovah Wit is, right? Right? I know Hare Krishnas, and I know a little bit, right? Enough to get myself into a conversation, but I have my own beliefs at the same time. But this platform isn't about my beliefs, but sometimes, right, the conversations will get tied up because, well, this is my brand and this is me, and I can only be genuine in those beliefs that I have. Just understanding that, I got some smart cookies that kind of hang out with me that you guys will be able to pick and pick through and siphon out what's true for you, what resonates for you, right? How it works for you. We got this word. See, and you can see I'm bringing it right back to the main trunk of the tree. We got this word love this week, you know, and love is complicated. Love hurts, right? Love is a turdy. Love is a hard one. It's one that can surface and bring us joy and excitement and adventures. Hello, Nancy. I know that's you. Right? But at the same time, it can give us heartbreak. It can give us worry, right? If those are your children, and right, you worry that they're going to make some of those same mistakes as you did, that they're going to not pick well, and maybe you come from a culture where you're going to pick for them, right? But you have to look at the next generation. You have to look, right, at the compatibility and the values of the people that we're partnering with, right? To make sure that we're all on board, right? My mother was religious. My mother was, well, legally she was Protestant, but she did Jehovah Witness, Catholic, evangelical, gospel. Oh my goodness, she did them. She did them all, but she loved Jesus 100%. My mother did, right? But my father was spiritual. You'd never see him. You'd never see him go to church. Not in a million years. My dad meditated twice a day his entire life. My dad, I'm convinced, right? Because of those practices, that he actually doubled his lifespan, right? From what it could have or should have been. I do believe that, honestly, I don't think I was supposed to wake up to a lot of these ideas. I'm not quite sure if any of us are supposed to be waking up to some of these ideas. But I think that whoever, whatever is in charge of all of this says, well, you got woken up to all of these, right? Do you want to make a little bit of movement? Do you want to get the bigger picture a little bit? Do you want to, right? Like I wrote here, help us rescue the world, right? Possibly give it another chance. Maybe we'll get a 360, start off at the beginning again. That wouldn't be fun as a one celled amoeba to start all over again. Or, right, if man were to go extinct, because there's that possibility, there's a really good possibility, right, that could happen. Really, a really good possibility that could happen. And in rescuing the world, there's lots of things that we can do to make it so that that doesn't happen, right? My part in rescuing the world is to keep us soft, to help us keep ourselves soft. I tell you, when it comes to love, I'm very lucky that I didn't go hard, that I didn't go cold, that I made some good choices that gave me the opportunity to lighten myself enough that, right, that love found me, and I reciprocated in that I got to have that experience of love, whereas lots of people who have those dynamic relationships and upbringings in their lives, they don't get to feel the love. They might not have ever felt love. I might never have felt love. Grateful, grateful, because I don't think I would be sitting here right now, right? If it wasn't that love, it was enough. It was enough to stop me from not loving myself. And that's the truth, right? I was always somebody to care for myself. You wouldn't know it, right? I kind of accepted the physicality of my being. I shouldn't have, but I did, right? But emotionally and mentally, think I did a fair job. I think I did a fair job in that, right? I look around at the world and I can see that the kids are going to have so many problems growing up in this generation, right? Got parents that are trying to do the job all by themselves and have a job, be both parents and hold a job, where the TV or the video games become the babysitters, right? I come from that generation in the 70s. TV first came out, oh my goodness. Pippi Longstockings and Lost in Space. Those were my babysitters. Those were my babysitters. I get it. But now, because it is the norm where you have both parents working or one parent working and trying to raise a family, right? I think the amount of time I was spending on TV, right, compared to what the kids are watching on TV, Netflix, or playing in video games now, I think it's probably tenfold, 20-fold. I have no idea. I don't play video games. I never got hooked, right? Most of my sisters, most of my family did. My dad loved the technical age, right? He had speakers in the 70s that were bigger than he was. He loved music, right? But there were lots of things that my dad loved, but I didn't love the video games. And I remember when the Nintendo first came up, it didn't interest me. I was all about the outdoors, even even way back then, right? I trailed off a little bit. I covered a few bases with this word love today because love is confusing, isn't it? Right? Love hurts, right? There's a reason they call country music suicide music because it's deep to the soul that it wrenches out the heart and feels the pain of love gone wrong, right? Or just love gone away. And we are in the patterning of love because we desire it, right? We strive for it. It feels so much better than loneliness. It feels so much better than envy, right? Feels so much better than those limiting beliefs and those unworthy feelings that we have about ourselves. So we fantasize in that pursuit of that one thing that just takes us down every time. And yet we try, right? And yet we keep going for the love. And I think that's what we're meant to do. I think a lot of the reason that we're not woke up to one life to the next is because of all that heartbreak, all those lives that we connected with. Oh my goodness. I wouldn't want to come back lifetime after lifetime after lifetime and have this experience like those other parts of me are having with me and loving me because I'm amazing. Oh, I just that's a joke, but I am, right? It's that attitude, right? I would hate to think that parts of me are coming back and they would have to be sad because they're in something difficult, right? They've they've come into a life where, right, traumas are just one hit after another, and that can be discouraging, and that can shut you down to the point where you might not even have a opportunity to realize any of these ideas that I'm talking about. And again, that nervous laugh. But that's okay. That's okay. That's twice tonight in this live that I did that nervous live, that nervous laugh. That means, right? A couple of things that I was not comfortable with surfaced. And that's a good sign. 100% that's a good sign. I'm working towards that, right? I really am. I hope you guys see that effort, right? But I don't believe it's all supposed to be just right? And then just totally triggering and shocking the system out, right? Or have that blow back in my face in the unkindnesses that happen when we're triggered, right? When we screw with each other's systems. It's not my intent. My intent is to get that thought, that imagination, that consideration, right? Moving a little bit because, right, that's the engine. That's right. I mean, the physicality of booting our butts into that action is one thing, but right, you can't do it unless all of us, meaning me, myself, and I, right, and whoever comes in here is all on board, right? All on board. Okay, you guys, I'm trailing off in the conversation. I think I'm going to end that there. I'm going to just come into the comments here. Hello, Nancy. Well, Cindy, I don't know what it's like to have parents. I grew up without parents. I was a Pippi Longstocking lol. I grew up without loving anyone. Isn't that amazing, Nancy? I have to say, I've known Nancy for a very, very long time. I know her, Nancy's story. Um, and it's incredible because I know your heart, Nancy, right? And I know how loving you are. And it's amazing that you love yourself that way and you love others that way, that it didn't make you cold, that it didn't make you shut down, not having that love come into your life. I right 100%. Prime example is in Nancy's life, and it was just like I was saying. I could boo about my life, but I've been loved. I've experienced love in so many amazing, dazzling ways, right? All kinds. That brotherly, sisterly, right? That codependent way, that romantic way, right? There's that parental way. I felt that in that caring for me, right? And that's amazing. That's amazing, that carrying out in the world. There isn't enough of that. And I think in this rescue of the future, we need to care. We need to care more, right? Those of us who've hardened up, right? We need to get working on softening up. And, right, that's scary. But if you have your boundaries in place, and if you have that love for yourself to be your own best friend and your own bodyguard, right? Rescuing the world, it's possible. 100% it's possible. Love can save the world. It sounds kind of hokey, doesn't it? But at the same time, it doesn't because, well, it's true, right? That's why we love life. Like, love life, right? If you don't love life, what is life? An existence of boredom? an existence of fear and trauma, we always go for the feeling that feels good. But in all honesty, right? In loving ourselves, we have to accept it's a mishmash of all of it. And if you can stay soft enough to give love another try, I've been in love a few times in a lot of different manners, right? It comes to us in so many different ways. Yeah, so many different experiences. But love is love, isn't it? Okay, you guys, I'm babbling away. I'm going to end my live right now. Right? Your own best friend, your own bodyguard. You were loving on yourself, and you were the evidence. You were the evidence that, right, that love was possible. Yeah. And I think, just in the person that you are, I don't think you had a choice, right? I don't think that you could have done anything to make yourself unlovable, Nancy. 100%. Okay. Um, yeah, me too, Nancy. I love the outdoors too. Today I was working on the not the campsite. I was working on the mines and the different rock quarries and road cuts that I want to visit on my trip. So I've been filling in on those days, the itinerary, the little fun adventures that I'm going to do on those days. And yeah, I can't believe how well it's working out. But I think, the more prepared you are, right? That when those hiccups arise, that we won't go into panic mode, right? The only thing that will put me in a panic mode is if the car breaks down and I can't get it repaired fast enough to get me to the next site. Then I'm just chasing one campsite after another. And that could happen, right? But I suspect that, um, uh, right, that there are other parts of me too that are invested in this, and it's going to be amazing in its experience, not just for me, but for you guys too, right? I'm going to do my very best to get some great adventure videos for you guys. Okay, you guys, that's my good cheer. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.